What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined, as always, by Connor Rogers. This is podcast 31 in the past 30 hours here at Badlands. As the hits keep coming, pod dropping tonight. Connor and I giving more reaction to the game, the Davante Adams trade, getting to hear from CR on the feed, and then War Room tomorrow morning, where we're going to answer all of your, as many as we can, War Room Discord questions, because there's a ton coming out of all of the action for today. CR, how you doing? How you feeling? It's been 7 days. It's been a hell of a week here.
It's hard to believe. It feels like we've lived 4 seasons within this season already.
Yes.
That's how I feel. I say this on the pod whenever there's primetime games to kind of give you a peek behind the curtain. And now Mets playoff baseball has been dropped into all of this, which is just remarkable. I wake up on weekdays. I go to Connecticut for my show with NBC. And then when the Jets play on primetime games, I go down to Manhattan World Trade Center and we do the shows from there. A primetime game, I usually get into my house sometime after 2 a.m. and then wake up and, kind of do a lot of it all again, besides the going down for Jets the day after the game. And it's so right now, as we sit here and record at 5:30 on Tuesday, it's just, I'm so, it just, everything's spinning, right? You're sleep deprived. You just can't believe how the Jets, even when it feels like it's over, then we're back. And now I'll say this, right? Because the Jets on Monday night, they did let one get away. I know they're frustrated. It feels like it really goes back to, feels like the kind of loss that you could swallow if you had just beaten Denver, because you sit here 3-3. You know what your problems are on the defensive side of the ball and special teams for the large part, and we'll get into the offense in a little bit, but where Ulbrich and the staff, you got to give them benefit of the doubt that they're not going to turn this into a top defense, but a competitive defense. Can they? I think they can. It doesn't mean they will. Can Greg the Leg start making his kicks, or you find another solution? I hope you start actually figuring that part out sooner rather than later, because now he's lost you 2 games, right? He's lost you 2. So
the middle reliever who's lost it. You called it.
Yeah, he's lost. Right, exactly. He comes in, he walks 2 guys, and he gives up a home run, and then he does it all over again. And well, Joe, let me ask you before I keep going on that: were the conditions in the stadium that much to blame? Because it didn't look like it at all.
No,
yeah,
it was very, very windy in the parking lot before the game. It was not that windy in the stadium, and Paul, myself, and my cousin were sitting where he doinked the second one, basically almost directly behind it. It's also the end zone they caught the Hail Mary in. The wind was not a factor at all. There was also not a single person in that stadium who thought he was going to make that kick, and the doink ripped through my soul as he missed it. And I was, as I was telling you before we recorded, I think me and Paul were almost dead at the end of that game. We were just sprawled on the seats. I don't know. I didn't think we were going to make it out. Fortunately, we actually did make it out pretty quick, but wind was not a factor in the stadium to miss kicks like that.
For me, this loss was a total 180 from the Vikings loss. After the Vikings loss, which they really should have won. If you hit Garrett Wilson on that throw, you win, whatever. But I put that loss aside. This loss, I was legitimately pissed off. And I'm sure you guys being there made the experience so much worse. And I want to hear about the stadium experience in a bit. But I was pissed because they just get absolutely demolished up front on defense. Their front is so soft and just gets absolutely battered. The missing kicks is one of the worst aspects of football. It's awful, just missing kicks. It's such a stupid aspect of the game. Although, like you said, it wasn't shocking. And you look at it, and underneath all of this, they're 2-4 now. Their backs are against the wall, which I'm very curious how they respond, knowing that, let's be real, the Jets are about to be playing some playoff football for a couple months here. That's kind of how it goes in the NFL. You got to start climbing out of a hole. You got to first find your way back to 500, and then you got to start positioning yourself for the playoffs. They have been given the confidence lift by trading for Devante Adams, right? This locker room now knows, hey, it's on us. We're all in. There's no more excuses. There's a lot of different variables to talk through. Tyron Smith can't move right now. You drafted a tackle 11th overall. Is that gonna be a move, a button that you press sooner rather than later? I thought there was a lot. I got to give credit to Todd Downing, and I know the bar was really low but give him credit for making the necessary changes this offense needed to make, which was their highest rate of motion, the spacing they created in the passing game, getting Breece Hall going in the run game. I thought Garrett Wilson played enough snaps in the slot where he was very effective from inside and outside, and now getting Davante enhances that. And I think at the end of the day, people are sitting there and going, well, they didn't score touchdowns. And yes, the touchdowns are going to come, but they did really enough to win this game. And the kicking let them down and the defense let them down. And the thing that I'm legitimately pissed off about is that there was no surprises on defense. It's the same utter nonsense over and over again. And they sit there playing the definition of insanity, expecting it to change. We can't sit here and be angry directly at Michael Clemens and Solomon Thomas all the time and Tony Adams all the time when we know what they are. You know what they are. And I get it. Some people might be sitting here and going, well, what's the answer? They got to change things schematically to help the run. And they got to put the big boy pants on some of these corners right now. And I know they had some rough calls, but those calls aren't going to be made every single week. And honestly, they probably got to get some different bodies out there because these guys, they can't play right now. If it's Watts, McGregor, whoever it may be, all I do know is Clemens right now is not the answer. Kinlaw had a bad game. Quinnen's been quiet. I guess CJ Mosley isn't healthy. I'll have his snap count up in a second because you think in a game that you need to play heavier, you'd want Mosley, who can run through contact better than a guy like Sherwood and even Quincy at times. And, Mosley ends up playing 8 snaps. I guess he's not healthy. Now to be a little fair, they're really down a lot of guys. Chuck Clark goes on the IR. Ashton Davis has to be out there. You're already down Jermaine Johnson. Isaiah Oliver has to play for Michael Carter. But man, I think the run defense to me, it needs a schematic lift and it needs a facelift of just different people. You got Lecky Fotu back. He was brutal in this game. Absolutely brutal. I mean, let's be real. Joe Douglas's front that he came into the season with is horrific. Like it's just a terrible job. All the guys they lost and you can't be one Jermaine Johnson injury away from uncompetitive disaster. And that's what it is right now. So the Jets are in a position where they're going to have to outscore teams. And I think they could do it at times. And they're in a position where the front doesn't need to go from being, one of the worst in the league to top 5 in the league, but they have to find a way to be competitive. And I'm fascinated to see what Ulbrich does in the lab that is realistically going to put more pressure on the secondary. But I'd rather challenge Russell Wilson and Drake May to throw for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns than to just have a quarterback turn around and hand the ball to Ray Davis and just get punched in the mouth like an absolute chump. So that's why I was pissed off after this game, despite there being genuine positives, in my opinion, from the offense in a game that if they make the 2 kicks, they'd be in first place in the AFC East. Instead, their backs are against the wall.
It's never complimentary football. The offense was rolling to an extent in this game. They got up 3-0. Like, hey, they had a lead. And the Bills literally just ran the ball down the field with their backup running back. Not a single pass. And to see the strength of this defense now become a weakness, and this is not new news. We talked about this all offseason, all summer. No Al Woods, no Quentin Jefferson, no JFM, no Huff. What's your plan to turn everything over? It's failed miserably through 6 games. Now maybe they're going to scramble and get Reddick back for their final 10 games. Why they couldn't fix the need at receiver and the need at pass rusher and even the need at safety, which we talked about a ton over the summer and had to wait until it became true disaster, must-win time. I don't know. These were all kind of obvious moves, and they have no consistency up front. And they just have a ton of great answers. Like maybe Quentin Jefferson's going to get cut. You can get him back. Al Woods is still on the scrap heap. Now you're just like cycling back guys you got rid of. You play Leonard Taylor, you play Watts, you play McGregor. They're going to take their lumps too.
Can't be worse.
Can't be worse. I mean, we can't be worse. I mean, the fact that they lost contain on that Josh Allen run when the entire world knew that play was coming.
Oh my God.
It's just completely unacceptable.
It's pathetic.
To just lose a game, and again, they're finding creative ways to lose. To lose a game where you have 200-yard receivers and a 100-yard back, and Rodgers generally played well. And we could debate the public criticism of Mike Williams. From everything I've seen, he was right. Like Mike Williams ran the wrong route and tripped when he tried to get the football. And I think there's frustration there that Yeah, it's like, hey, 2 games in a row, man. I went to you with the game on the line and 2 times ended up with an interception. Now that quarterback's got to take the blame there. Like that's part of the job, but I don't think Mike Williams is going to be on this team much longer. We could save some of that for the back half of the pod, but 3 games, 3 gutting, 1 possession losses where each side of the football takes turns letting each other down with the missed kicks, with the defense not rising to the occasion. This game was there to be won. And I will say that when you're in the stadium and you're surrounded by Jet fans know when a game is lost, unfortunately. I always talk about when I went to the Jets-Pats game a few years ago when the Michael Carter interception got overturned and everyone at halftime knew the game was over. This was over when Braylon Allen's touchdown got taken off the board, and the Jets left with no points.
Great call, by the way.
Yeah,
that
there was not a
belly.
Yeah, and I thought Downing was really good. I mean, better than I thought he would be. He looks better by contrast to Hackett, but genuinely did some good things. And could he be like okay versus just being an egg salad sandwich? That would be really nice and unlock some stuff for the Jets offense. So that was encouraging, but you got to leave with points, man. You got to get touchdowns. Breece Hall run into the end zone.
Yeah, what was
Tyron
that?
Smith, don't get the holding penalty. Even Garrett, like I kind of like to see him make that 3rd down catch, even though he got laid out. And this is part of why you got Davante Adams. The Jets don't have players who score touchdowns. I love Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, and Garrett Wilson scored tonight. But when you're an elite, you want to be like an elite running back and receiver, you're scoring like 10, 12, 14 touchdowns a season. I feel like the only guy who's going to score that much this year is somehow going to be Allen Lazard, who's going to have like the worst 12 touchdown season in NFL history. And I don't know. It was just, it's been such a weird roller coaster of emotions. I think all of us kind of knew in some ways Davante was happening no matter what. We wanted until it was like officially official. And it's really exciting because he's awesome. And he's going to be really good with Aaron Rodgers. And he's going to help so much. But they have so much work to do, man. And I hate playing in Pittsburgh. And I hate playing Mike Tomlin coach teams who are the antithesis of the Jets. It should be a winnable game, whether it's Russ or whether it's Fields. It feels like no matter what, it's going to be 13-13 or 16-16 in the 4th quarter. And we're going to be right back where they've been. And yes, can they win? And then can they beat New England and be right back to the 4-4 we said? Sure. And Davante will help a lot, but goddamn, it's been an exhausting week, man. This team has lived like 10 years in 7 days. So the Davante trade's officially official now. What did you think of it? And what do you think comes next? Do you think Mike Williams is out? And how do we expect to see Davante Adams change this offense, ideally starting this Sunday night against Pittsburgh?
Yeah, you're going to move on from Mike Williams, which it was always interesting, right, with the Jets. And that's just in hindsight. We talked about this on the podcast many, many times because obviously another, my part of my full-time job is I do a fantasy show at NBC 5 days a week. And part of that prep that I came across was that, wide receivers coming off an ACL, historically, if you just run the numbers and look through the trends, they are not very productive in their first couple months back. It's just, you can go through as many different examples as you want. And obviously the odds of them, bucking that trend, shout out to Dan, it kind of decline when they're also 30. It's not like he's 25. So what I never understood was, and I guess their options were kind of few and far between to be a little fair here, was that they've always had their eye on Davante Adams. This has been the worst kept secret in the NFL, but they needed another guy to get them to what we thought would be the deadline. It was even a little earlier than that. This came a couple weeks early, and we didn't know if Mike Williams would offer much the first 6 weeks of the season. And the reality was he didn't offer much the first 6 weeks of the season. Lazard, for all his drops and boneheaded mistakes, offered more than any of us could have actually expected.
Yeah.
So the reality is this was a whiff again. And it's just, you're starting to add up. You have to ask yourself at some point, right?